All right.
You're up. Go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, everyone. This is Juanita's computer and it's black. I'm not seeing Hollywood squares. I'm not seeing anything. It's completely black and I couldn't unmute because I can't see the unmute button. So anyway, Kevin, you're in control. My name's Tom. I'm an alcoholic, and by the grace of a loving God, I've been continuously sober since June the 15th of 1986. And for that date, I'm truly, truly, and it's an honor to have been asked to share. It's weird not to see anybody's faces. Can you see me, Kevin?
Oh yeah, we can see you fine.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess that's good. It's a little different though. I'm trying to get used to it, speaking to a black screen. Well, happy Founders Day, everyone. Today is June the 10th, and it's Founders Day, and we're now 88 years and counting, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I couldn't be more grateful. I went to a meeting this morning and we talked about pretty much that we're 88 years and how grateful we are, years ago. And, I won't get into the lesson and all that. I have been doing this for I've been speaking at conventions and such since 1995, and I've never gotten good at it. Never have. I am still just the novice that I was when they threw me out there in 95 in front of a bunch of people in Amarillo. So, and I kind of take pride in that, I guess, because Joel's on here, and he and I had the same sponsor till he up and died on us, and that was Don Pritz. And what he told me is we never want to get too slick at this, we never want to get too good at it. And believe me, I have not. So that's just a little forewarning as to what you're going to get. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I have a home group. My home group is simply called An AA Group. And we meet Monday nights at the Salvation Army in Santa Fe. We're a big book step group. And we're an hour and 15 minutes, and we read the big book very slowly and very kindly, I believe. And we discuss our experience with working the steps as outlined in the big book. That's what we do there. And I'm very proud of that group. We're 23 years old this coming October, and I believe we've done some good service to our AA community. I also live in Nashville, Tennessee, about 6 months out of the year. I can't tell you which 6 because we kind of hop around a bit. But when I'm in Nashville, and I'm there quite a bit, I have a home group there, and it's simply called the East Nashville Men's Stag. And I love that group as well. I'm proud of that group as well. I never would go to a men's meeting. I was totally against them. I thought they broke the traditions. And about 8 years ago, a guy invited me to this meeting, and I thought, he can talk to me all he wants about that, but I'll never go because I don't do that, because my sponsor didn't do it. And this thought crossed my mind while he was still talking. And I thought, you don't know anything about this meeting that he's inviting you to, but you already have an opinion of it. And I think the big book calls that contempt prior to investigation. And that's pretty closed-minded of you. And the only way you can make that up to the universe is to go to the meeting and at least check it out. I mean, you're already convinced of how it's going to be, but why don't you go, have enough of an open mind that you go and check it out, and if it's exactly what you thought, you don't have to go again. And what I did was I said this prayer that was given to us through my sponsor. We call it the set aside prayer. And there's 196 versions of it, probably, or more. But the version that I said that night was, God, please allow me to set aside everything I think I know about men's meetings, and especially the East Nashville Men's Stag, for an open mind, an open heart, and a new experience. And then I went to the meeting, and it was completely different from the narrative, the story that I had made up about it. And it was a bunch of younger guys from their 20s to their 50s That's younger because I'm 75. Okay. And they were they were open, they were honest in a way that I hadn't heard people be at AA meetings much before that. And so at any rate, I joined right in, and I'm a loyal member of the East Nashville Men's Stag when I'm in Nashville. So let's see. I guess a little bit of how I want to talk to you about what's been happening to me in my recovery in the last years. If I live till next Wednesday, I'll have 37 years of continuous sobriety. And before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, my personal best was 8 days and 16 years. So I am beholden to imagine. But at any rate, I want to tell you about the growth that's happened to me in more recent years. But I got to qualify for you and let you know that I didn't get here on the wings of glory by any means. Bill Wilson, in his story, in the end of his story, he says the alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature, and I didn't love it, you know. I did knee crawling, snot slinging. That's about how I was, and it wasn't always like that, but it got like that. Okay, so I grew up. I was born in the South. I was born in Kentucky, and my folks moved us to New York when I was 6 years old. That was not a good move for me at all. I was a Southern kid and did not take to the move. And I had, I guess, what we would call today anger issues. You know, I was angry about a lot of stuff. Things just seemed unjust to me. And I had this sense that I didn't fit in. And the reason I had that sense was because I didn't fit in. And so, you know, I felt just out of place, out of step. You know, I can still feel like that sometimes. There's days I wake up and I think, man, I'm on the wrong planet again. You know, I don't even know how things work here, you know. But at any rate, generally, I'm not like that. Generally, I fit in my skin and I feel like I am on the right planet. But back then, you know, I was an insecure kid and came up in the late 60s, and there was a lot of social unrest that I got involved in, and just a whole lot of stuff that I could point my general angst at, you know, and my anger and disillusionment at. And at any rate, my parents had moved to New York. They were hoping for a better life than they thought they could have in Tennessee and Kentucky, which is where they were from. And this was in the early 50s. And, you know, they'd lived through the Depression. My dad had fought in World War II. And so, you know, they just wanted a better life than they thought they could have. And so they were involved in the business world of New York City, and there was an awful lot of drinking that went on. And I believe both my parents were alcoholic. You know, the book says, we do not like to pronounce anyone as alcoholic. We do it all the time, but we don't like to. And so if my parents weren't alcoholic, they invented a new name for it. But so in my book, they were alcoholic. At any rate, their drinking bothered me profusely. I really did not, you know, it was one of the big issues between me and my parents, is that when they were in their cups, they were just hard to take. And so I didn't drink. You know, I was pretty much against drinking. The people that I ran with, we were interested in social issues in the late 60s. And, you know, most of us did not drink alcohol. You know, we did smoke marijuana and take LSD because that was consciousness expansion. But we didn't drink because that's what the bad guys did. At any rate, so I had gone to this college that was run by the Quakers, and we set out to save the world, and traveled around the world. It was a world traveling college called Friends World College, and we missed. We didn't save the world. You might have noticed, and but at any rate, I met a little gal there, and we started running around together. And we were out in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where her parents had moved from the East Coast, and they decided that it would be a good idea for us to get married. They were, I guess, wary of their daughter shacking up with this kind of ne'er-do-well, myself. And so it kind of pushed us into a marriage. She was 19 and I was 21. And I don't think I know full well we were not marriage material, and it was way too early to get married. Well, she got pregnant instantly that night, the night of the marriage. And so I found myself in a situation that I hadn't been in. I'd been a student up until that point, and now I'm a husband, I'm legally a husband, and I'm about to become a father, and I'm 22 years old and going to be a dad. And I am absolutely freaked out. And I don't even know it. I mean, I didn't even know, how scared I was. I put up a good front, and I was working on I had to get a job, and I had no skills. I'd been in college, but I didn't graduate, and I had no real, marketable skills. And we were on a little island off the East Coast, and I was working on a construction site with a bunch of construction guys. And I was the kind of the low man on the totem pole. And one night the real men, the older guys who really knew the ropes, they invited me to the bar with them. And we went to the bar. It was a grubby little joint called the Chicken Box. And they hadn't served chicken there in 30 years, and they never started, as far as I know. I went back to Nantucket to make amends for a bunch of the, criminality that I had pulled, and went to the Chicken Box, and they still weren't serving chicken. So apparently they just never caught up with that name. But at any rate, I go in there, and a guy looks at me and he said, "Here, I bought this for you." And he handed me a shot of amber fluid. It was whiskey. I didn't know what it was, but I'm not going to refuse it. A real man bought me this drink. And so I drank it, and it tasted kind of good. And a short while later, another one arrived, and what it was Jack Daniels. And I come from a long line of Southern bourbon drinkers. And so I always say it was kind of in my DNA, it was kind of a setup for this. And so I took that second shot and I blasted it back like I'd seen the cowboys on TV do. And something miraculous happened. And if you're alcoholic like me, you know what that was. And what it did was it gave me some hope. It made me see, I had decided that my life was over at 22 years old, that now it was going to be this ball and chain of a wife and child for the next 22 years or the next 18 years. And at 22 years old, my life had just ended abruptly. And so when I took that second shot, it kind of opened up a vista to me, like maybe, the fun's not over. Maybe there's some fun left and some adventure left, and maybe there's some hope left, And what it really did was it killed the fear that I'd been living with, And I know that now, that I was living in terror because I knew I couldn't pull off being a father or a husband, and I was just scared to death. And so that second drink, when that really hit, it killed the fear, and man, it just changed my whole world outlook. I started drinking from that point, and that wife and I had another child, and we had just a horror show of 7 years of an alcoholic marriage and an alcoholic life. And eventually she found someone who could take care of her in a better fashion than I was able to. And she left, and I was distraught as could be, because by then I wanted to be a husband and a father, and the ship had sailed. And so that made for more drinking and just, more stuff. Anyway, speed this up because I lost about, I think, a third of my talk from all the, computer stuff in the beginning. I eventually met my current wife, Juanita, and she's been my current wife for 45 years. And we met in Santa Fe, and it was lust at first sight. We're both convinced of that now. And we got together, and about a month later, she moved in with me, and she had a daughter and I had 2 boys, and the daughter was right in between the ages of my 2 boys. And then we had our daughter. She got pregnant right before we got married. It's kind of the way we did it. And so we had yours, mine, and ours. And unfortunately, that's the way we kind of played that. It was not good stuff. It was a real difficult way for those children to grow up. And for years, I said, if I could have done anything other than what I did, I would have done it differently. You know, the promises that are attached to the 9th step say, you know, we will not regret the past or wish to change it. And for years, I said that's the only thing in the 9th step promises that I, you know, that has not come true for me. And interestingly, just, you know, fairly recently, since I've had, you know, 35 plus years, I've realized that my children are all just superlative people. They're just incredible people. They're all, they're creative, intelligent. They are principled people. They are compassionate people. All of them are, you know, they help other people. They are wonderful parents. All of them are. They put their children's welfare ahead of what they want. And I never did that. And so I couldn't be prouder of my children. I could go through the whole litany of what they do and, you know, the various jobs that they have that are in service to mankind and such. But there's not time to do that. But just suffice it to say that, you know, I don't know that if they hadn't grown up the way they did grow up, that they wouldn't be the people that they are today. And so I don't say that any longer. I don't say that I regret the past about that. It hurts me when I think about what they had to go through. It does. And I'm ashamed of it. But I wouldn't change it, you know. So at any rate, the drinking progressed as it always does. And it was obvious that, you know, this had become a really big problem. I was a general contractor who could just barely, you know, keep jobs together, could just barely keep a job. And I was drinking on a daily basis and having blackouts, you know, constantly, and driving in blackouts a lot. I had a lot of you know, consequences that happened. I won't go into all of that. But you know, every time something, like I ended up in jail or I had a broken bone or something, you know, I the next day I would say, God, I've got to not drink like that, you know. But quitting never occurred to me. You know, the idea was, you know, I want the ease and comfort that comes from taking a couple of drinks, because that seems to be the only way I can stay on this planet. But I sure don't want those consequences anymore. And so tonight or tomorrow, I will do it differently. I'll do it better, you know. Eventually what happened was the morals and values that I had been raised with, which were good, started to erode completely. And I found myself doing things that years before would have just made me sick to my stomach. I mean, I just, every moral and value I had, I went against. I was an adulterer. I was a thief. I lied constantly. I lied to my children, to my boys. I disappointed them to the point where, you know, they couldn't trust me. And, you know, I'm the most important guy in their lives. And if they can't trust me, who can they trust? And it was going on like that. And now I'm drinking to not see what I've turned into. I mean, it kind of, the whole thing kind of turned around. It's not so much to kill the fear, it's to kill the you know, the understanding of the animal that I had turned into. And so at any rate, started to fight that. I decided that, you know, I need to, you know, at least control this. And so I tried various ways to control it. None of them worked. I finally, you know, came to the conclusion that that controlling wasn't going to happen. And so I became a booze fighter, what I call. And that doesn't mean, you know, a fist fighter, although I was a fist fighter. I was a hell of a fighter, never a winner, you know. I would be the designated punching bag oftentimes, but that's not what I'm talking about. I was fighting the booze, trying to make it work, or trying to stop entirely, trying to quit entirely. And I tried various things. I tried some psychiatry and or, you know, therapy, and that works well. You pay a bunch of money to lie to the therapist, you know, because you sure don't want to, you know, if you tell the truth, you know what's coming and you don't want to hear that, so you never tell the truth. I had warning of a doctor. My doctor in Santa Fe, Trevor Hawkins, said in 1985, he said, "You'll be dead in 6 months the way you're going. And I'm not trying to scare you. That's your medical prognosis." And people say, "Well, my God, surely you stopped then." And I said, no, I didn't. After I came out of Trevor's office, I went to the El Toro liquor store and got 2 miniatures of vodka to think that over, because that's some disturbing information you need for stop drinking. And for a judge in Santa Fe, and he said he'd throw me under the jail if I came before him. And it was a bad morning with a horrible headache. I couldn't remember what had happened the night before. And thank God it wasn't worse than it was, but it was definitely very bad. And this judge had gone to kindergarten with my mother-in-law, who PS was the court clerk in Santa Fe. And he was also the judge who had married Juanita and myself. I mean, it was just a bad morning, And but he scared me. I've been to jail 4 times, and I don't jail well. And some people do. Some people get used to it. I never did. I absolutely hate jail and would do almost anything to stay out. But the way I was living my life it's a miracle I didn't end up in prison for the rest of my life. So at any rate, there's a lot of that. I tried some spiritual means, and anyway, that didn't work. Well, I was kind of a dilettante with that. I was a complete vegetarian for 6 years, no meat, fish, or eggs at all, as part of my spiritual practice. And luckily for me, Jack Daniels, Camel Straight cigarettes, and heroin were all vegetables, or I would have been in big trouble with that diet. Obviously, that did not work. That's a true story, by the way. That did not work. I tried antabuse. Typically, I ask if there's any antabusians out there, and I'm sure there are. I can't see your faces, but I know you're out. I can smell you out there. I know there's people old enough that they took antabuse. Nobody these days raises their hand for the antabuse thing. But I took antabuse and I drank on it, and I got violently ill, and have never found it necessary to stay. It's a done deal. I don't need a program for it. It's in the bag. So those were some of the ways I tried the love of my family, and I absolutely adored my family, and I could not stop for them. And what happened to me was that I eventually understood that there was no stopping for me. I tried to quit again and again, and then I would find myself drinking, hours later after I'd made this resolution, or, maybe 2 days later. And it just became, obvious and evident to me that there's no way I'm stopping, that I really can't live on this planet, without something in me, some kind of substance. One of the things I tried was the heroin maintenance program for alcoholism, and that backfired terribly. And I became addicted to heroin, and I never stopped drinking. And it just was awful. I mean, I won't dwell on that, but it was just god awful. And there were times when I would think to myself, people look at me and they see an alcoholic bum, they think I'm just a bum who doesn't care, and that's not me at all. That's not my problem. Is I care too much. I'm too sensitive a man for this world, and I must drink in order just to interface with you guys and just to stay here, I mean, it's for me, it's a way to survive, and they don't understand that. Nina Simone had this great song, and it said, "I'm just a soul who's misunderstood. Oh Lord, please." I always mess that up. "I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood." And man, that's exactly how I felt. Dr. Paul, in his story, he talks about that I was judging myself on my intentions, and the world was judging me by my actions. And it was just like that, and I would think to people would look at me with disdain, and I would think, you can't see the heart of gold that I have. You can't see the goodness inside me, that resides there. And sure, I'm a loser, but I'm a beautiful loser, you know, and I'm a fool, but I'm a holy fool, you know. And it went on and on like that. And this was a delusion that I lived with, you know. And it was a way that I you know, was able to live with the things that I've been doing. And I didn't do a very good job of it. So at night, I would pass out. And this is like the last 5 years of my drinking. I would pass out about 7 o'clock, someplace between 7 and 9 o'clock. And then at 3 a.m., it seems like I would wake stark awake, and I would come awake, and I would start thinking about the things that I had done. You know, I would take a little inventory at 3 a.m. And what I realized later was I needed a drink at 3 a.m., but I couldn't keep booze in the house because Juanita was the warden and she wouldn't allow it, you know. And if I'd taken a couple of pops, I could have gone back to sleep, but I couldn't. So I was awake for hours at a time, thinking about just all of the things that I had done that just, you know, just absolutely drove me crazy. You know, I thought about the women in my life that I'd mistreated. And I thought about Juanita, my wife, who I just lied to. I never told her the truth. And I thought about my children, who I would promise I would come and pick them up and take them to my house, you know, for the weekend. And then I'd get there at 10 o'clock at night, already just, you know, 3 sheets to the wind, and my ex-wife going, you know, you're shit-faced, get out of here. You know, I put them to bed hours ago. They waited on the stoop for you for hours, and I put them to bed. And I'd realize at 3 a.m. that I'd broken that trust of my own. And I would think about money that I owed. I remembered almost every cent, you know, and I owed a lot, you know, from good people, from friends that I borrowed money from, quote unquote, and then driven across America, you know, never to be heard from. People don't get it that you know, young people don't understand that back, I got sober BC, and that's before computers, before cell phones, and before crack cocaine. But there really was a time like that, and at that time they couldn't find you if you hid out. Like the FBI couldn't even find you, you know, or they could find you, but it took them a long time. It's not like it is today. So, you know, I owed money. I owed a lot of money. I owed banks and various things. And I would just think about this and just rake myself through the coals and just absolutely hate myself for what I had become. And in the morning, just, you know, wonder why I was depressed and suicidal and had to start drinking Jack Daniels for breakfast. And it went on and on like that, you know. Anyway, I've been also to AA. That's one of the things that always happens with a drunk of my caliber. And I just absolutely hated it. There's not time to go into all of that. But my wife had a good job with the state of New Mexico, and we had some insurance as a result of that. We were basically bankrupt, you know, and we lived in a beat up trailer that was just, anyway, there's no way to describe it to you. We owed a lot more money on it than it would ever be worth, because back then finance companies would lend you money. And at any rate, but what we did have was this insurance policy, and people were looking for me in Santa Fe. I had bad checks all over town. And I meant to correct that. I'm not from Albuquerque. I got sober in Albuquerque, but I'm not from Albuquerque. I live in a little town called Pewaukee, New Mexico. And Santa Fe is where my home group is. My address is Santa Fe. So it's basically Santa Fe is where we live. But at any rate, I was wanted in Santa Fe. And so I ran off to the big city of Albuquerque and got into a treatment center to hide out, basically, because people were looking for me. Anyway, I went in there, and I knew full well I couldn't stay, I wouldn't get sober, but I thought it would buy me 30 days to kind of, you know, get myself together and you know, kind of regroup is what I thought. When I went into the place, I was what I call physically addicted to alcohol, which means that I shake apart when I don't drink. And I'm physically addicted to heroin at the same time. Really a bad state of affairs. And there's not time to tell you about that. Just, you'd have to trust me on that. So I go into this treatment center on June the 14th of 1986. And I had a real bad night the first night. They gave me drugs so I wouldn't have a seizure, but I still couldn't sleep. And one of those nights, like about the second or third night, I saw my life for exactly what it was. See, I said, I know I do these horrible things and I know I behave in ways that go against my values, but you kind of do that. It's really not my fault. Like the world has been out to get me forever. And it's if it wasn't for bad breaks and misunderstandings, like Clancy used to say, and these ex-wives of mine, and just people that I worked with, and my parents, and oh my, it just on and on. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be in this shape. And that night, about the third night into that thing, that house of cards completely fell apart. And what I realized was, this is on me. I did this. I'm a loser in every department of my life. I'm a complete washout and a failure in every department of my life. I said I was a father, I'm not. I said I was a husband, and I'm definitely not a husband. I said I was a friend. I'd been stealing from my only friend from our joint bank account. There was no friendly direction for me whatsoever. And I saw it in living color, and I just collapsed. I just wept all night long. They call it the alcoholic moment of clarity. And that set me up for some good stuff. And what happened was a little AA meeting that was allowed to hold their meeting at that treatment center. And they weren't part of the program. They were a separate thing, but they paid rent at the treatment center. And they held, at that time of year, they held their meeting outdoors, out on a patio. And so one morning, about the fourth morning I'm in there, I'm still in a hospital Johnny with my butt hanging out. And I'm looking out these plate glass windows at some people about 6:30 in the morning. They're doing something, they're setting something up. And some of the patients in the hospital are going out there, some of the clients. And so I asked a guy, what's going on out there? And he said, oh, it's some extra AA thing. It's not part of the program. You don't have to do it. He said, yeah, the only good thing about it is they have real coffee with caffeine in it, and they'll let you drink as much as you want. And they were serving decaf in the hospital. And I start clicking, I start thinking, and I think I would like a cheap caffeine buzz about now, because I'm on the natch, and that's not a good place for me to be. And so I go out to Alcoholics Anonymous for their coffee. Just a crazy thing, I know. And you could drink 4 cups, they wouldn't stop you. They'd let you keep drinking their coffee. We all smoked cigarettes. It was just, and they had changed AA since I'd been there. And I'll try to, I've got 2 hours worth of stuff to fit into about 15 minutes here, or 12 minutes. So I'm going to do my very best. This was my spiritual awakening. This was my original awakening. Had you asked me, if I believed in God, like when I went out to that AA meeting that was out on the patio, had you caught me on the way out and said, do you believe in God? I would have said, absolutely not. I know what God is. God is something that rich people use to control poor people. And it's something that parents use to make their kids stay in line, like the boogeyman. That's what God is. I mean, it's absolutely, absurd. It's like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus or something like that. And that's what I would have said. Years later, I realized that, I called myself an atheist. Years later, I realized there was no way I was an atheist. I'd taken way too much LSD to be an atheist, okay? I knew something was going on, right? But at any rate, so I go out and I'm out with these people, and like I said, they had changed AA since I'd been there. And they were saying prayers, and they were talking about God, not a whole lot, but they were mentioning God, quite a few times. And this is what happened. The 2 men that 12-stepped me, and this is how they did it. One's name was Ruben Ruiz, and he just died this last October, and I loved him like I can't even put into words, man. He meant so much to me, and I was able to thank him for all he'd done for me right before he died. And I went to his funeral. Anyway, Ruben told a story. He was a big Chicano guy, and I relate to Chicanos. I'm married to a Chicana, and one of the things that bothered me about Santa Fe AA was there were no brown faces that I could see there. Now I'm a white boy from Kentucky, but that bothered me a lot. But anyway, Ruben was this big Chicano guy, and he told this story one morning. He said, I was working, and he did it like this. He said, I was working at the VA hospital as an orderly, and I was very depressed. and I stole a bottle of Tuanols, and I took all 100 and I washed it down with a pint of vodka, and I jumped from the 4-story window to the ground below, and all that happened was I crapped in my pants. And now I joined AA that day. I just want you to know. I mean, when I heard that story, I thought, holy tamale, man. If Ruben's here, I'm in, because he's definitely off the same spaceship I am. I put $1 in the basket that day and joined. Okay. So I'm listening to Ruben, man. He's got my undivided attention, right? And then the other guy was this guy, James, who made the coffee and set up the literature and all that. And James told the story that he had lived under bridges in Albuquerque, in Martinez town, drinking wine and shooting heroin. And so I went, man, you know, these guys they come from the streets, you know, and they had other wild stories like that. Well, the reason that I listened to these guys and heard the story of their God was because of where they came from, okay? These guys were scoundrels like myself, you know, spiritual mongrels, okay? If they had been clergy or anything like that, or even the counselors in the place, I wouldn't have listened to them. I just wouldn't have heard them. But because of their stories, I tuned right into them. And so one day I said to them, how do guys like you stay sober? I just can't fathom, like, you know, this is 2 weeks into it. I said, I've never known people like you who stayed sober. Like, how do you do it? And they both told me the same thing. They said, we pray to God in the morning, and if we're sober at night, we thank God for our sobriety. And I thought, oh man, that is so lame. That is so not real, you know? And, but at any rate, they were sober. I mean, they were the living example, you know? One day, I went every day. I never missed. I just didn't want to miss any of these wild stories, you know? And so I was out there one day, and this guy, James, said, you know, this weekend, my ex-wife let me take my daughters to the state fair. And he said that, and my heart broke, because I didn't have the wherewithal to take my kids to the fair. I couldn't do it. All my money went elsewhere. And I thought, you know, I'm looking down on this guy for talking about God and praying to the fairy tale God, but he's got a life that has some kind of dignity and some kind of purpose, and mine's completely shot, you know? And maybe I'm sure he psychs himself into this, but maybe I could too. And so I started praying to the God that I knew didn't exist, right? I mean, I grew up in the Protestant church and all that, but I had long since given all that up. I mean, I've been around the world and seen the ugliness of this world. I knew there was no God. And so I start this prayer at night. Thank you for my sobriety. And I kind of was sarcastic, like, thank you for my sobriety. And then the next day I did it again, and then the sarcasm wore off. And about 4 days into the prayer, I felt like I was encompassed by some kind of a warmth, or some kind of there was a comfort that came over me, and I liked it. I really liked it, and so I kept that prayer up. Thank you for my sobriety. And eventually, when my head cleared a little bit, I was in that place for 33 days. And I said, thank you for my sobriety, the most precious gift I've ever been given, because I drink no matter what. I don't stay sober. It's not in the cards for me to sober up. And I had already given up on that, just hoping I would die. So at any rate, I go back to Santa Fe. I become a meeting makers make it guy. I have to always throw this caveat in: meeting makers make meetings. That's what they do. Step workers recover from alcoholism, and I am a recovered alcoholic. I don't think about it. It's just what happened as a result to the recovery program that we have. Our book guarantees that will happen, and it happened for me. I don't drink alcohol, and I don't think about drinking alcohol, and I haven't for many, many years. At any rate, it's a long story that there's not time to tell, but through, you know, a bizarre series of coincidences, I met up with some big book fanatics from Denver, Colorado, and I liked what they had. I wanted what they had, and they talked about things that I wasn't hearing in my local meetings. And I'll try to do this quickly. One of the things that these big book people talked about was making all your amends, finishing all your amends. They really put an emphasis on the 9th step, and they put an emphasis on the 11th step and on the 12th step. Okay. and the first step, all the steps, but they really stressed the ninth step and how important it was to, and they would ask this question, how free do you get? Like, how free do you want to get? Some of you all heard my friend Charlie Parker's in Kingsport, and he was sponsored by a friend of mine, Mark Houston, and Mark used to say, do you want a half measure of this or do you want the whole enchilada? How free do you want to get? And when I got sober, I was about 2 years sober, and I was talking to a guy, and I said, luckily for me, a lot of the crimes that I committed and the rank stuff I did, there's a statute of limitations on that, and I can't be prosecuted, for that. He said, well, that's good, but unfortunately, the subconscious knows no statute of limitations. So all of the things that you did that went against your morals and values, basically things that if someone did it to you, you'd hate them for it or you'd condemn them for it. If you've done those things and haven't cleaned them up, they're rattling around in your subconscious, and you're dragging that through your sober life, trying to be happy, joyous, and free. And until you clean that up, you never will. And I wanted what these guys had, man. There was something in their eyes, like Evie Thatcher, man, and I wanted it. And so I got busy with that. It took a lot of prayer. It took a lot of years. It took a lot of money. What I found, there's not time to tell you about the amends because we blew it in the beginning of this thing, but some of the most intense spiritual experiences I have ever had in my life, and just ultimate experiences, I guess you'd call them, were making amends. And just the coincidences, if you want to call them that, the synchronicities that happened when I got into that world of sincerely making my amends and really wanted to do the deal and make things right with everyone that I had harmed or that I owed. It just was like miracle land. It was just like living in miracle land. And things just popped and changed, and impossible things happened. And it was just incredible, And what I did, some of you all, I'm sure, are old enough to have known one of my heroes, Tom Ivester, who passed away this last October also. And I heard Tom speak in Hobbs, New Mexico years ago, and he said this thing. He said, by making my amends, I was buying pieces of my soul back, one piece at a time. That's exactly. As a result of making my amends and paying back the money started coming to me. I've been blocking that channel, apparently, because I said, I can't afford to pay what I owe, I found out they don't want our money, okay? They want theirs back, though. They do want that. But anyway, by doing that, I unblocked that channel, and I've been solvent ever since I finished my amends. I'm not rich, but I'm solvent, and I have more than I ever planned on having or ever deserved to have. And I think a lot of that had to do with the amends. I went to all sorts of people, my family members, old girlfriends. I went to many grave sites, and some of the most intense, some of the most incredible amends that I've made were at grave sites, because the spirits of the people I felt, like they were sitting beside me. Anyway, through doing that, okay, several things have happened. One of the things is I could never meditate because it was the chatter of 1,000 monkeys. As a result of cleaning up my past, the monkeys are down to about 3 or 4. And so I can sit in the silence, and it's a safe place, and it rejuvenates me. It recharges me for the day. And I wouldn't give anything for quiet time. It's just so important. At any rate, so I've gone, deeper with that. And so a few other things that came as a result of that is that I sponsor a lot of guys, and they'll come to me and say, I can't possibly make this amends. It's just impossible. And I go, well, that's not impossible. It's absolutely possible. And I'll tell you why, is because I made that amends. I did the exact kind of thing that you're balking at right now. And they look in my eyes and they know I'm telling them the truth. And I inspire and encourage them to be able to do theirs, which is wonderful. I've made amends to people who didn't even remember me, but I definitely owed them amends. And they've said to me, I don't remember you, but you've made my whole day. And I've had other people say to me when I've made amends to them, you've renewed my faith in human beings, and which I didn't have much faith before you came to me and did this. I believe that by doing this stuff, we really get busy with this and we really do all 12 steps and we live this way and we demonstrate it, that we make the world a better place. I talked to Don about that and he said, you're right, but we can't look at that. We have to look at one alcoholic, helping another. But he's dead now. So I talk about we're making the world a better place. I'm going to have to end this and I wished I didn't have to, Next week, I'll be 37 years sober and I've got a lot more to learn, I've got a lot more growing and to do and a lot more learning. I have a friend up in Cincinnati. He's a musician and he ends one of his songs with, I've got a lot more living and a lot more giving and a lot more lessons to learn. And I'm almost 37 years sober and I'm a seasoned beginner, which means that I'm open-hearted, open-minded, and can learn more stuff. And Mary Thayer, who's my mentor from years and years ago, told me that like 36 years ago, 35 years ago, told me, I've been here a while. I've seen him come and I've seen him go, and you grow or you go. And I've found that to be true. It's constant growing, here. So, I'll end with this story. When I went to those AA meetings that I went to in Santa Fe in '85, I went to try to stay in the big bed, to try to stay in the house. Juanita was kicking me out one more time. And I said, don't kick me out. I've got a friend who's, sober in AA. Let me go to the classes is what I called them. And I went and I just thought it was just the absolute pits. I just thought, this is awful. This is like so depressing. I mean, what a bunch of losers, And I looked at it as some kind of a penance or a penalty that I would have to pay for the crappy life that I lived up to that point, like a penance. Like if you come and sit in this depressing place and it's going to be linoleum floors and folding chairs for the rest of your friggin' life, maybe at the end of your life your karma will even out, and that's what this is about. It's about a punishment for the life that you've lived. And I thought, man, I'm going to, if I do this, I'll have to do this for the rest of my life. Oh my God. Well, when I was 9 months sober, I went up to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I heard a psychiatrist speak. He gave a talk and a bunch of us had been listening to his stuff and reading his books. And his name was M. Scott Peck, and he wrote The Road Less Traveled. Some of you probably know what it is. In his talk, he said this. He said, Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important social movement of the 20th century. Most important social movement of the 20th century. And I reflected on that some years later. I didn't get it at the time, but I looked back at that and I thought, man, the life that I lived, the crappy life that I lived, and all the things that I did that I was so ashamed of, that bought my membership in the most important social movement of the 20th century. And I don't have to do this. I'm privileged and I get to be a member of AA. And I am forever grateful for that. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry this was so sketchy and stuff. God bless you all.